Kamala Harris and the American Deep State. Their blueprint of suppression. How totalitarian governments enforce control and maintain order. In a world where freedom and individual rights are celebrated, the existence of totalitarian regimes serves as a stark reminder of the dangers inherent in unchecked power. Totalitarian governments, by their very nature, seek absolute control over every facet of society, leaving no room for dissent, free expression, or democratic processes. This article delves into the systematic ways in which such regimes suppress their citizens and maintain order, using a combination of fear, propaganda, surveillance, and violence. 1. Control of information and propaganda, corporate media, YouTube, Facebook. One of the primary tools a totalitarian government uses to suppress its citizens is the control of information. By monopolizing the flow of news and media, these regimes craft a narrative that glorifies the government while vilifying any opposition. State-controlled media such as MSNBC, NBC, CBS, PBS, etc. become the mouthpiece of the ruling elite, offering only the official version of reality. In this system, propaganda is not just a tool, but a weapon. Leaders are portrayed as benevolent, infallible, and indispensable. Citizens are constantly reminded of the dangers of external enemies or internal subversive elements. This unrelenting barrage of misinformation molds the public consciousness, creating an environment in which loyalty to the regime is equated with patriotism, while dissent is branded as treason. 2. Surveillance and invasion of privacy. ATF, IRS, FBI, CIA. A totalitarian government cannot function effectively without closely monitoring its citizens. Surveillance becomes a critical mechanism of control, turning individuals' private lives into public matters. Through extensive monitoring, whether via advanced technology, secret police, or a network of informants, such governments ensure that no action, conversation, or thought escapes their watchful eye. The fear of constant surveillance has a chilling effect on the population. When individuals believe they are constantly being watched, they self-censor, curbing tendencies toward rebellion or even mild criticism. Citizens become complicit in their oppression, policing not only themselves but also their neighbors to avoid suspicion or persecution. 3. Suppression of dissent and opposition. Dissent is the ultimate threat in a totalitarian regime. Therefore, the eradication of opposition becomes a central task. Political rivals, activists, intellectuals, and even ordinary citizens who voice disagreement are swiftly dealt with, whether through imprisonment, exile, or execution. Therefore, the efforts put forth by the DNC, Democrats, judges, and prosecutors against Trump, and now Elon Musk give us a clear picture. Totalitarian governments are notorious for their use of secret police and paramilitary forces to silence opposition. The mere suspicion of disloyalty can lead to arbitrary arrests, show trials, and brutal punishments. Public dissenters are often made examples of, serving as a warning to anyone else who might consider challenging the regime. This relentless persecution creates an atmosphere of terror where survival often depends on outward displays of loyalty, even if the individual harbors private doubts. Fear becomes the glue that holds society together under such regimes, as citizens are forced into conformity through intimidation and coercion. 4. Control of education and thought, education unions. Totalitarian governments understand that, to maintain control in the long run, they must shape the minds of future generations. Education becomes another tool of suppression, where indoctrination replaces critical thinking, and loyalty to the state becomes the highest virtue. The National Education Association, NEA, is the largest labor union in the United States. The NEA puts the interests of teachers ahead of the students. Curricula are designed to reinforce the regime's ideology, teaching young people that the state is supreme and that any alternative way of thinking is dangerous. Textbooks are rewritten to fit the official narrative, and history is distorted to serve the needs of the present. Students are encouraged to report any subversive behavior among their peers or even within their families, further tightening the regime's grip on society. In this environment, free thought is discouraged, and intellectual freedom is crushed. The result is an obedient population incapable of imagining any system of governance other than the one in place. 5. Violence and fear as tools of enforcement. While propaganda and surveillance play their roles, totalitarian regimes ultimately rely on violence and fear to maintain order. The state's monopoly on force is absolute, and it is willing to use this power to crush any threat to its authority. Public displays of violence, such as executions, disappearances, and brutal crackdowns on protests, serve as potent reminders of the consequences of defiance. The fear of such violence seeps into every corner of society, creating a paralyzing effect on potential dissidents. In many cases, this violence is institutionalized through militarized police forces, concentration camps, or labor camps. These facilities symbolize the regime's power, conveying that opposition will not be tolerated. 6. Economic control and dependency. A final method of suppression is economic control. Totalitarian governments often centralize the economy, controlling jobs, resources, and the means of production. By keeping the population dependent on the state for survival, they ensure that dissent comes at a steep price. Kamala Harris has said that if she is elected president, she would enact price controls. In this system, basic needs such as food, housing, and healthcare become privileges rather than rights, contingent on loyalty to the regime. This economic dependency stifles rebellion, as citizens fear losing the necessities of life if they fall out of favor with the government. Conclusion. The suppression of citizens by a totalitarian government is a multifaceted operation involving propaganda, surveillance, violence, economic control, and the systematic dismantling of free thought. By leveraging these tools, such regimes enforce their rule brutally, creating a society where obedience is mandatory and dissent is a death sentence. Understanding the mechanisms of totalitarian control allows us to recognize the warning signs in modern governance and remain vigilant in defending the principles of freedom and democracy. While history has shown the rise and fall of many totalitarian regimes, the threat they pose remains a constant reminder of the fragility of liberty in the face of unchecked power.